Bills, Jets, Week 17, Orchard Park. Let's get ready for it today on the Locked On Podcast Network.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into this crossover Thursday episode of both Locked On Bills and Locked On Jets. We're both proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're thankful for our everydayers, those of you who make us your first listen every single day and never miss a single episode. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com or download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, and we're here to get you ready for Week 17. Bills, Jets, we're going to give you the path to victory for both sides. We'll talk Bills storylines, but we start by focusing in on the Jets. And John, last time we spoke, it was Jeff Ulbricht's first game as head coach. The Jets were 2-3. Now they're 4-11. They fired their general manager. Changes are coming. And I guess I'd like to start here. Where does Aaron Rodgers factor into the conversation when it comes to changes with this Jets team and what we expect in 2025?
Yeah, Joe, it's funny because the first time these teams met this year, we did our crossover show, and the question was, would the Jets succeed under Jeff Ulbrich? And the answer has been a resounding no. The team has 2 wins in 10 games under Ulbrich. And I think back to last offseason, and I remember Aaron Rodgers said something that seems very prophetic now. And he was asked about his future. And at that point, he said, I think I'd like to play 2-3 more years. But I know if it doesn't go well this year, everybody's going to be gone. And after the Jets beat Jacksonville 2 weeks ago, Rodgers had a big game. Devontae Adams had a big game. And there was a feeling within a portion of the fan base that maybe the Jets should run it back. I was actually surprised how many people were saying that off a last-minute win over a Jacksonville team that was 3-10. But I think if you look at the situation with this team, if you read kind of interpret what's being said behind the scenes, it sounds like the Jets are ready to move on. And Rodgers has also kind of been offering subtle hints in his weekly Pat McAfee interviews that he's not very happy right now. I mean, there were a few weeks back, he mentioned that there are teams in the league where they get the support from ownership when things aren't good. And Rodgers was asked, do you think the Jets have given you support? Do you think the ownership of the Jets has given you support? And he kind of insinuated the answer to that was no. Just this week when Rodgers did his McAfee interview, he made a joke about how he might be the first person ever cut by a teenager, which is a whole other story of there's the media reports that Woody Johnson's sons are actually factoring into some of the decisions the Jets are making. So I think at this point, it feels very unlikely that Aaron Rodgers is going to be back with this team in 2025. And that's probably for the best. I think both sides could use a fresh start. For the Jets, I think it's just clear this era has not worked out. The plan to go all in with Rodgers has been a complete failure. And for Rodgers, I would imagine this is the end of his career. But even if it's not, he probably would be better off in a different situation.
Do you feel like Aaron Rodgers is playing at a level that tells you that there's no more good football left in the tank? Because I think it's kind of difficult to reconcile some of the statistical output and realize that it's decent, but also the team's just not winning. And it's like the defense is statistically okay. And the whole thought process was, well, if you just get decent quarterback play out of the quarterback position, then the Jets are going to be all right. And they were better with the defense they had in the past than Zach Wilson. Like, how do you reconcile all this? It's kind of hard to piece it all together. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, I actually think back a few years of Drew Brees' last season with the Saints. And I remember a lot of people I know who watched the Saints said that, he wasn't the same guy and he was holding them back. And I remember looking at the numbers and they looked really solid. And I was confused. So I had kind of a similar thought. Rodgers is not the guy he was in Green Bay. He's nowhere near as mobile. Now, I do think the mobility's improved the last couple of weeks. I think since the bye, maybe he's recovered from some injuries. So he's moving a little better, but he's not super mobile at this point. And he just suffered another injury last week in the loss to the Rams. He's not really thrown the ball down the field as frequently as he did in the past. I mean, he was always one of the guys who was, if you look statistically, he was one of the quarterbacks who threw the most deep passes in the league. He's near the bottom of the league this year in that category. I think, like, if in like a perfect situation, and like maybe like a situation like where Pittsburgh got Russell Wilson, where you have a great defense and you have a lot of pieces in place, and you're only paying him like $1 million, or if you're not paying him a whole lot, maybe it could work. But he's at the end of his career. I'd say he's probably like maybe like somewhere around like the 20th best starting quarterback in the league. That's a situation where if everything's perfect, you can win. I just don't. But you have to remember what the Jets did. The Jets essentially reorganized their franchise to build around Aaron Rodgers. They brought in the offensive coordinator he wanted. They brought in all the receivers he wanted. They did a lot of maneuvering with their salary cap to try and juice this team up for 2023 and 2024. They have borrowed a lot of future resources to build around him. Maybe it could work with another team. The one thing I would say that is a concern is I don't know that his body can hold up over the course of a full season, because it feels like every time he takes a hit, he's going off to the tent. Yeah, he's suffered multiple injuries this season. I feel like his body's kind of falling apart. So part of it is, I think he's declined this year, but I think you also have to consider what things are going to be like a year down the line. I think a year, in 2025, he's going to be 41. He'll turn 42 during the season. Do you think his body's going to hold up? Well, this year he's battled through a lot of injuries. We know what happened last year. 2 years ago in Green Bay, his production was down. A lot of people said, well, he was playing through injuries during that season. I just don't think his body can hold up at this point over the course of a full 17-game season. I think he can still play really good games. A couple of weeks ago in Miami, he lit the Dolphins up. There were moments against Jacksonville. The first half against the Rams was very good. He can reach a high level of play at this point, but I don't think he can do it consistently through the course of a full season.
Let me ask you this: is a lot of the conversations with the Jets are about the future. There's still talented players on this roster. When you consider both offense and defense, who are those building blocks where you say, hey, that's a nucleus piece for what the Jets can be down the line? Who has emerged maybe as some of those core players?
That's a great question. And I'll be honest with you. I was always lukewarm on the Rodgers trade, because I felt like the Jets had a really good core of young players 2 years ago. And these are players who are starting to enter their prime right now. I think you start with Garrett Wilson, who's on his way to a third 1,000-yard season. It's been a long time since the Jets drafted and developed a receiver like him. He's a legitimate number one receiver. There are rumblings now about his future in New York. There have been a few people behind the scenes who are suggesting, maybe Garrett Wilson isn't happy, and it would be tough to be happy because he's been here 3 years. They've lost all 3 years. The quarterback situation has not been good. On the other side of the ball, he's not having a great season. He's not playing at the standard he set the first 2 years where he was first team All-Pro. But Sauce Gardner, 2 of his 3 seasons, he's been absolutely excellent. I think those are the 2 key pieces. And then if you look around them, there are some other guys who maybe aren't quite at that level, but still good pieces you can build around. I'm thinking Elijah Vera Tucker, one who's finally had a healthy season. The thing with Vera Tucker is he's always been a good player when he's been in the lineup, but when he's been in the lineup has been the operative phrase, because he suffered season-ending injuries the last 2 seasons before this one. Jermaine Johnson, who unfortunately suffered a pretty serious injury early this year. He was a Pro Bowler last year in year 2. He's a really very good defensive end. I think they missed him a lot, especially in the run game, because he was really the only defensive end the Jets had who could set the edge consistently. And Brees Hall at the running back position, who maybe isn't quite as good as a lot of Jets fans hoped he would be. I think a lot of us thought that, maybe he'd be like one of those like top 5 backs who you can build an offense around. I don't think he's quite at that level, but he's a home run hitter. He's a quality back, and I think he's part of the solution rather than the problem. So I've talked about this a lot on Locked On Jets. The silver lining to the situation is that this is not a situation like you had in 2020, where you were coming off the Adam Gase era, and Mike McCagnon had just been fired as the general manager. That team had zero talent. It had nothing to build around. This team does have pieces. 2025 is probably just going to be a reset year. Like, they're going to have to unclog their salary cap. They're going to, have to fill. So they have a lot of holes that they need to fill. But you're right. There is at the very least, there is a foundation here that the Jets can build around going forward.
Even like Joe Tippmann at center, Will McDonald has really taken a step. Quincy Williams, Jamie and Sherwood feels like one of the best stories about the Jets this season as a linebacker and what he's been able to prove. So there's some good young talent. Obviously got to get the most important stuff right. The general manager, the head coach, and the quarterback. And it feels like obviously the Jets have decisions to make with head coach and general manager. There will be a new one of each of those. It's just a matter of the quarterback. And feels like Rodgers is on the way out, and kind of the X factor there, maybe Tyrod Taylor as a guy that they signed a 2-year contract with, that's under contract, that at a minimum is the type of bridge quarterback that can get you through a season. And obviously we'll see what else shakes out with the quarterback landscape. When you look across the league and you think about guys like Justin Fields or Daniel Jones or Sam Darnold, not necessarily, I think, an option for the Jets, but there's a lot of quarterbacks like that, Andy Dalton, that there's going to be Kirk Cousins. There's going to be quarterback carousel, maybe not with some of the biggest names, but as you've seen different guys land in different spots, whether that's Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold, step in and be able to help, right? That are kind of guys that you maybe thought it was done for them. Maybe the Jets land into one of those guys. So obviously a fascinating offseason coming for the Jets, and it always is, right, John? And of course, make sure everyone's paying attention to Locked On Jets. John will have you covered every step of the way. All right, we're talking Bills storylines on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with us. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It was like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, John Butchko, time to turn the attention to the Buffalo Bills in this conversation. I'll be happy to entertain any questions you might have, sir.
Well, Joe, it's interesting because, obviously the first time these teams met this year, the Jets were in a state of transition as Jeff Ulbrich took over the team. But that was also maybe the shakiest stretch the Bills, or at least entering that game, that was like maybe the shakiest stretch of football the Bills had played prior to that point. And since that game, you've seen the Bills play outstanding football. I think they've only lost once. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I think they've only lost once since they played the Jets back in October. So what's changed since the last time these teams met?
Yeah, they've won 9 of 10 and certainly have figured out a lot of things with their operation. I think the biggest thing was coming out of those back-to-back losses to the Ravens and Texans. I felt like Josh Allen kind of got away from what made him really successful the first 3 weeks of the season when the Bills started 3-0, which was efficiency in the offense and efficiency in the passing game. And I think you can maybe look at this Patriots game and have some concerns about that creeping up again. But for the most part, I mean, he's played at such a high level since then and has really done well to not only take what the defense is giving him, but also working the ball down the field and doing the Josh Allen things. And so that's been big. The run game's been pretty consistent with James Cook and really working in Ray Davis and Ty Johnson as good complementary pieces. And defensively, they've kind of been on a bit of a roller coaster with a lot of their personnel. They haven't had like a massive season-ending injury on the defensive side of the football, but it feels like there's been this never-ending cycle of back seven players in particular, linebackers, corners, and safeties that, guys just are in and out, it feels like lately. And that's been true lately where the Bills have been down both starting safeties or a starting corner. Matt Milano's back, but then he's hurt again. It's like they've had an issue with guys just being consistently available, which I think has led to some inconsistency on defense. But what has been consistently true about the defense, seemingly regarding not mattering who's in the lineup, is they get takeaways. They get these huge takeaways in big moments all the time, and 17% of drives against the Bills defense end in a takeaway. And so when you pair a big play defense that takes away the football with, of course, Josh Allen and the offense that he's capable of engineering with a good running game, you got a nice formula for winning football games. And so their depth has been stressed, but obviously they've been able to stack wins, 9 of 10, including an 8-game win streak there, a 7-game win streak there, and scored 30 points in 8 in a row. In fact, last week was the first time in 9 games that they hadn't scored 30 points. So they're playing well, but it also still feels like they're still trying to make sure they hit that stride entering the postseason.
I think back before the season. I remember back in August we did an AFC East preview show, and I want Locked On to delete that recording because I think he gets to win the division in that one. But I remember at that point one of the big questions around the Bills was, what would the offense look like without Stefan Diggs? And there were some questions from the outside. How much would losing Diggs hurt? And the Bills are obviously having a great season. So who are the guys who have stepped up? And how have they replaced Diggs' production?
Well, I think let's go ahead and call it what it is. And Stefan Diggs, great football player. I've said repeatedly, he gave the Bills the best 4-year stretch of wide receiver production in the history of the organization. This offense is better without Stefan Diggs. And it's not because they have better players than Stefan Diggs. It's that they're a more cohesive passing operation where there's no longer this emphasis to feed Steph, right? A lot of concern all the time that Stefan, is he happy? Is he getting the targets, right? You don't have to funnel 150 targets to that guy anymore. Even though he's a good player, it takes away from your overall operation. And Josh Allen feeds the ball to everybody, right? Who's the number 1 receiver on the Bills? Doesn't matter, right? That's the whole thing, right? Defenses forever have been predicated on, we want to take away your best thing and make you win another way. Okay, the Bills say, okay, sure. Like the best thing they have is Josh Allen, but it's not about any other complementary weapon. It is Josh Allen, and it's about him facilitating the offense, and he just has the freedom to operate. So while, yes, I'll get you the players, but I think step 1 is getting rid of Stefan Diggs in addition to Gabe Davis, where it's been an absolute lie for multiple years, this thought that Gabe Davis is a legit number 2 receiver in the NFL. Had the huge game against Kansas City in the playoffs where he set all the records, and then there was this thought that, oh, yeah, that's going to be the next guy. No, he's a very limited player, right? He's not a do-everything player. He doesn't separate quickly. He doesn't win after the catch. He's just a size ball skills guy down the field. And so moving on from those players and having a more well-rounded group of playmakers around Josh Allen has made the offense better. And so, of course, Khalil Shakir has kind of been the guy that's really emerged as the quote-unquote go-to guy if such a thing exists in this offense. Dalton Kincaid at tight end. He had some injuries this year, but still on a really good path to start his career. Keon Coleman is a rookie, 33rd pick in the draft. Him and Josh Allen have developed some nice chemistry. They take their chances down the field. They've traded for Amari Cooper, who gives them a guy that can go get a bucket, right? Go win a route, get a bucket. And then it's like Mac Hollins, who's a nice ancillary piece that comes away with a couple of catches every game and does a couple of under the radar things, whether it's a big block or like acting like he's going to catch the ball, but it's not thrown to him. And now all of a sudden the coverage is drawn there and it frees up somebody else. And then of course the rushing offense with Dawson Knox, like it's all of that, right? It's not that they don't have Devontae Adams, right? They don't have Jamar Chase. It's not about those guys. It's about all of them working with Josh Allen to score a lot of points. And they do that pretty well.
Yeah, that really resonates with me because, I've been watching the Jets for over 30 years now. And one of the things that frustrates me with the Jets is that it doesn't seem like they understand that it's not always about having the best player. It's not always about having the best pieces. This isn't fantasy football. It's about having the right pieces that fit together. And what you said about the changes under Diggs, that's a perfect example of that. Maybe they don't have a receiver as talented, but they're a better offense. And that's just something that's only, I think the Jets and a lot of teams in the league could learn.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And I think you get these big personalities at wide receiver, and they're great players, man. They really are. But sometimes it's to the detriment of your football team. And, they were very expensive too, John, right? Like the good receivers, the best ones are like well over $30 million a season. And it's just a lot to think about. And I don't, I wonder how it all shakes out like down the road as guys become more expensive and you feel like they're valuable and you start to ask yourself, well, do we really want to commit? Like that's all coming for the Bills. But you look at teams like the Packers, teams like the Chiefs and the Bills, they've all kind of embraced this type of mindset with their offensive personnel. And I think you look at all three offenses and feel like they're headed in a good direction. Obviously the Chiefs have had injuries, but if they had Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown all season long, that might look a little bit differently. So I don't know. Like the NFL certainly likes to pay receivers, but they also like to trade receivers. And I think there's a reason for that, right? It's just a funky position. And I think you got to get the right mix. I think in anything, it's about having the right mix of human beings in your organization. And, that doesn't always mean the most talented. It's the right ones that can work together to play good ball.
Yeah, unfortunately for the Jets, this is kind of like you kind of look at the way the Jets have built their team side by side with the way the Bills have built their team, and I think there's a reason one team's at the top of the conference, the other team's looking for another reset this year.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, and we'll see what the Jets can pull off this offseason, how the Bills can continue to build and keep the rest of the division at a arm's length if they can. Obviously, 5 years in a row winning it, which just means there's a lot of motivation from the Jets, Dolphins, and Patriots to come and get it. And we'll see who can do that. And obviously the Jets with some talent but obviously big decisions to come that will shape their future. All right, on the other side of it, John and I are going to get into the path to victory for each team in this one. Folks, be sure to stick with us. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the action with FanDuel, the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many different ways that you can pick up a dub. I love betting on which players will hit the over on stat projections and building parlays. It's really fun. I mean, we got a full slate of Saturday games, a bunch of games on Sunday. It's just more exciting to watch the games when kind of have a little action on the game. So check it out. FanDuel gives you so many different ways that you can win. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I'm Joe Marino, host of Locked On Bills, joined by John Butchko, the host of Locked On Jets, here for your Crossover Thursday preview of Bills Jets in Week 17. And Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app, use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, John, it's time for us to talk about the path to victory for each team in this football game. Obviously, the Bills are at home. They're favorites. I think 9.5 points is kind of where I've seen the line for this football game. The Bills were 14-point favorites over the Patriots. They won by 3. The division games are always a little bit tricky. Teams that know each other. And while, there's still a lot of familiarity here between these two teams. I know that there's been some changes with the Jets, but these teams know each other well. They know the type of football that they want to play. What's the path here for the Jets to go get an upset win on the road?
Joe, I don't think the Jets can win the game. I think the Bills can lose the game. I think if both of these teams play their best, which we haven't seen the Jets play their best all that much this season, the Bills are going to win the game. I think this is going to have to be like one of those scenarios where maybe the Bills look past the Jets a little bit. Maybe they play a little sloppy football. Maybe they turn the ball over, and the Jets probably need a performance like Davante Adams had against Jacksonville 2 weeks ago, where went off for close to 200 yards. I think it's going to take something unusual for the Jets to be able to win this game. These teams played a very, very tight game in their first meeting in, I think it was week 6. This is the different scenario for the Jets. I think the losses have piled up. You've seen the frustration mount. It's not clear what the Jets lineup is going to look like for this in this game. Quinnen Williams missed the game last week against the Rams, and the Rams just ran the ball at will. The Rams barely tried to throw the ball in that game because they knew they'd be able to run the ball successfully against the Jets. And that first meeting back in October, Bills went out, and that was one of the most physical opening drives you'll ever see, where the Bills barely threw the ball. Maybe they threw it once or twice, went right down the field and scored a touchdown. I just think there have also been some rumblings, nothing firm, but there have been some rumblings that maybe some Jets players are starting to check out a little bit, looking to the offseason, which happens in the lost season sometimes when you get to week 17. So I think unusual things need to happen. I think the Jets will need some big performances. Again, maybe Davante Adams has a huge game. Maybe Garrett Wilson has a huge game. I think the Bills need to make mistakes in this game. I think they'll need to turn the ball over. Maybe the Jets need to steal a possession here or there. run a fake kick or something like that. But I think it's that kind of game. I don't think I think if these teams line up, Buffalo should win. I think there's a lot working against the Jets in this one. So the Jets' path to victory is I think is more, do the Bills lose the game themselves? Because I think if the Bills come out and execute, they're going to win the game.
Yeah, you mentioned that first Bills-Jets game. We remember it well, John. Lazard down the seam, Williams down the red line, right? The red line, that became the phrase of the year, seemingly. And Aaron Rodgers throws Mike Williams under the bus. The next thing you know, he's gone. Interesting situation there. I think you have the right idea on this game. The Bills would need to lose it, and I think they can. I think the Bills have proven throughout their even their time as one of the better teams in the league is that they can have this type of game. They've had it to the Jets before. They've had it to the Patriots. They lost last year to New England, that 4-win team that picked number 3 in the draft. They lost to the Urban Meyer Jaguars. Like, this stuff happens. They will lose a game. Now, typically they don't later in the season. They're very good in December. I think they've lost 3 games since 2020 in December. 2 of them were in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. So they take care of their business late typically, but it's obviously interesting with the seeding implications. If the Chiefs win on Christmas Day, which we're recording this before Christmas, so we don't know what happens with that game. The Bills could be in a situation where they can't be the 1 seed and, they can win one of their last 2 and be the 2. Which is probably important to them, but those probably make some careful choices with players and making sure that, they can be healthy and playing their best going into the postseason. So I think you got the right formula there. For me, the Bills' path to victory is, number 1, is get back to being efficient in the passing game offensively. Nervous a little bit about Josh Allen out of that Patriots game where, holding onto the ball, average depth of target, percentage of deep throws, lack of percentage of throws to check downs, some off-target throws. It was like a bad recipe. Not a disaster performance, but it was so far away from what we saw for a long stretch, and it looked a little bit like what we saw back against Houston and Baltimore. That gives me a little bit of a concern. I think he can correct that very quickly. But, nonetheless, a game that you hope doesn't turn into a pattern here down the stretch. Number 2 is the Bills' corners have to win. Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson are good. And the Bills will have Christian Benford, their best corner, who's emerged as one of the best young corners in the entire NFL. But will they get Rasul Douglas back this week? He's missed the last 2 with the knee injury. Kyer Elam has started in place, and Kyer Elam's a first-round pick that's talented, but Rasul Douglas is the more consistent and savvy player in this Bills scheme, and they want to run some more man coverage, which they've kind of cranked up lately, and those will be some good matchups. That's good on good, right? Adams and Wilson versus Benford and Douglas, or Benford and Elam. So that'll be a fun matchup to watch, and I think obviously they probably want to get some production there for Wilson to get that third 1,000-yard season. So that's a matchup the Bills have to come away with. There's going to be battles won for both sides of it, right? It's good on good. But who's going to win the war, I think, will be a big factor in this game. And then number 3 is don't have a breakdown on special teams. The Bills had one last week. They gave up a fake punt where they weren't ready. They didn't have the right personnel on the field. They gave up a big return to start the game. And the Jets typically are pretty good on special teams. And, when you think about a game that you're worried about getting away from you, that you, like you said, if you go out and just play the game you're supposed to play, the Bills will win this game. But where are the margins? Where can that get away from you? And special teams certainly stands out to me as an opportunity for the Jets to steal a possession or take a possession or get a big play and get points. So the Bills will have to be careful there to not let that be a contributing factor to a letdown game against the Jets.
So I guess we could say great minds think alike. I think we're kind of on the same page in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you, John. I think we do see it the same way, but we both acknowledge, that there is a path for both sides of this. And certainly with the Bills coming off of a pretty tight win over New England where they were down 14 before you can blink early in the game. Hopefully that for the Bills side of things, that's a learning lesson, but obviously, it's the National Football League, man. You said you've been watching it for 30 years. Me too, man. It's how this stuff goes. So we'll play it and see what happens.
Any given Sunday. Well, Joe, it's great chatting with you as always. I love the fact we get to do this twice a year, and I know we're division rivals, but I feel like a kinship with like the tortured fan bases. So wish you guys the best of the luck the rest of the way. I know you'll be in the playoffs. Maybe this will be the year for Buffalo.
Well, that's very kind, John. Thank you. I always enjoy our conversations. We have good. Within the Locked On Podcast Network, I think the AFC relationships are like very respectful. Where you go to some of these other divisions, man, these guys get after each other. But we got good will towards each other here in the AFC East. All right, John, that's it for this year. You and I doing crossovers, but obviously we'll be together next year, both games, and certainly the AFC East big preview. A lot of time between now and then, but we'll see if you pick the Jets for a second consecutive year.
I'll give you a preview. I'm not doing that again. That was even when I was doing it, I was like, this is going to come back to bite me. Isn't it? I've been watching the Jets for too long.
All right, John, thanks for being here. Thanks for everyone for listening. As always, we kindly ask that you share, subscribe, rate, and review. Have a great rest of your day, and we will catch up with you all again real soon.